Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor. My guest today is longtime college golf coach John Knauer of Texas San Antonio. John is retiring this summer and will no longer be walking fairways with me, so I'm sad about that, but he's been a great friend of college golf. He was the 2006 National Assistant Coach of the Year. He was my assistant captain on the 2007 Arnold Palmer Cup team. He's coached numerous PGA Tour players. Just been a great friend of college golf, but more importantly, he's been a great friend of mine. So I really think he has a lot of great things to say today. I think you'll enjoy the listen. So John Knauer, Texas San Antonio. All right, everybody, let's give a big welcome to John Knauer to Better Than I Found It today. John, great to talk to you. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, absolutely. I'm pretty excited to be on.
You know, you've wanted to come on this podcast for a while, and it took you retiring to get on the podcast. That's a terrible comment on me. I mean, you and I are buddies. I should have had you on here long ago. So I have been looking forward to this since you and I had talked about it. So thanks for being patient with me. I'm not always the easiest guy to deal with.
Well, I mean, you always expect some pretty high things. Like, you know, you're either going to need to win a national championship or you're going to need to do some major things to really get on here and get to speak with you. And so I just didn't feel like a national title was in my cards in the near future. So I figured if I just retired and threw everyone for a loop, that would be big enough news that I could kind of sneak on here.
Well, you did throw me for a loop. I did not expect you to retire. That's unusual. Before we get into the rest of what I want to talk about the decision to retire and step down, because truly you were not forced out. You literally decided you wanted another place in life. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I had 2 more years on my contract. I wish they had fired me. I could have got paid out. That'd have been pretty sweet. But no, I think over the last few years, my parents they're about 80 right now, and they've really kind of been slowing down. And I'm an only child, so I don't have, a brother or sister or somebody like that just lives over there that I was always like, oh, they'll take care of them. So I knew at some point in time, whether that meant they had to go to assisted living facilities or that meant that, they had to move in with us, and which really wasn't a great option because, I mean, all their friends and all their people and things they do are over there. So to just pick them up and move them to a spare room here in San Antonio really wouldn't have been that good of a deal. So I just kind of felt like at some point I might need to start thinking about this kind of thing. And as that was going on, we hit COVID and things kind of slowed down. And I think it made me think more about it because I had a little more free time. When we're sitting around and we couldn't go out and recruit or we couldn't do all these things, we weren't playing tournaments, I had more time to read books and more time to watch podcasts and do all these kind of things. And I think it made me reflect a little bit more on kind of where I was in my career, what it was in my life, that kind of thing. And then finally, my daughters are 17 and 13. And I just have always, obviously I grew up in a small town. I grew up in College Station, and College Station's way bigger now than it was when I grew up there. Mm-hmm. But having that experience of just kind of feeling safe and feeling at home, and it takes 15 minutes to get anywhere, and there's really no traffic, and all the little things that you can say that are opposite of a big city. Now, my wife and I, we've lived in Tucson for 10 years before this, and then we've lived here 14 years. So for the last 24 years, I've lived in a big city, and San Antonio is exploding. We're the 7th largest city in the country, and we will be 5th here in a few years is what they're projecting. They're talking about overtaking Chicago and like Phoenix or whoever is the next on the list. And, you wouldn't just give up 27 years of coaching to say, well, I don't like the traffic, right? Okay, mm-hmm. Well, I don't like the traffic, but that's not it. But the more I started to kind of look around me and realize that that big city was encroaching in on like where I live, where I shop, where I go to work, those kind of things. And it was a little tougher send your daughters out and say, hey, why don't y'all run up to Walmart and get some ice cream, and think, they always came home with some story. Oh yeah, some dude came up and tried to talk to us in a parking lot, or, we went by, this kind of thing. There was always something kind of going on. And I finally looked at my wife and I said, okay, this is different now. This is not if someone randomly from College Station, like an old friend, happened to have a job and called me and said, hey, would you, and it fell in my lap, I always said, I might like to do that. This is I need to start reaching out to some people and telling them, hey, I may need to look at this. And so my sister-in-law is actually an HR person where I'm going to work. She was at A&M as an HR person. She moved over there, and I was just talking to her about kind of the differences and some of these things. And she said, hey, we're exploding. The place I'm going, CC Creations, is a screen printing company, and they employ about 500 people, and they're projected to go to 800 people in the next year. They're building a facility now to quadruple their output. And it's, it's a great family place to work. I think I also had, how you see those people and they never get married, and you're like, what was the deal? And their expectations were way too high, and they just never, no one could meet those standards. I felt like for going to work, I kind of had those expectations, and this place actually met them. And so it was sort of the perfect storm, if you will. And then on the flip side, the golf side of it, and I know we'll talk about this later in the hour here, but I really feel like I'm leaving this team and everything I've built here in an awesome place. The next coach I have this set up so good for them, and they're going to be able to come in here and make it even better than what I did. And whereas when I got this job 14 years ago, there was nothing here. It would have been better off, and it would have been an easier build for me had they just had no team at all and just start from scratch. It was not in a good place. And I mean everything from facilities to players to coaches to assistants to, just anything you can name. There wasn't a golf bag. There wasn't a shirt. There wasn't a box of balls in the drawer. Wow. There was nothing. And so it took a while to kind of build it. And then what we've built here, I'm incredibly proud of. And I know we'll touch on that later. But it feels good to be able to leave, this whole thing better than you found it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I just feel like I've been able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think it is too. It's obvious your team has always been competitive in the years I've been at Baylor, for sure. In the 8 years I've been at Baylor, you guys have been competitive. So, but speaking of this move to College Station that you're going to make, going back home, that's great. You had a childhood buddy who's pretty prominent in college golf, and that is Alan Bratton at Oklahoma State. Alan grew up literally with you. You played on the same sports teams, went to high school together. So talk about Alan Bratton, your relationship with him real quick.
So the Brattons moved to College Station when Alan was in 6th grade from Tennessee. And his dad worked at the vet school with my dad. And we, and for those of you that are all Texas people, Steve Tatum, who is the College Park high school coach, the three of us, our dads all worked together. Steve was a couple years older than us, and or a year older than us, I guess. And but he moved in, and it was literally a deal where, you're at 6th grade and you're at lunch and you just meet this new kid and you're like, hey, how are you, or whatever. And what do you do? Oh yeah. I play a little football, or I play basketball. I play golf. And I was like, golf? It's like, really? I play golf and all this kind of stuff. Oh, okay. So it was almost instant bond. Here it is. And then we find out, of course, our dads work together and that kind of thing. So we've kind of been best friends literally since the first day we met. And so we go through school together. Alan played football in 7th grade, I believe. And we both played basketball in 7th grade and golf. And then he decided, I was like at basketball tryouts in 8th grade and he wasn't there. And I saw him in class the next day. I was like, what are you doing? He goes, no, I'm not going to play basketball. I'm only going to play golf. And I'm like, what? What do you mean you're only going to play golf? And he was like, I just feel like that's my best sport. That's my best chance to really go forward and do all these things. And I said, okay, I get that. Like, I'd already figured out probably when I got to high school that the same thing was going to happen. I was much better at golf than I was at basketball. And I also kind of figured, just selfishly, I was like, I can probably letter my freshman year in golf, but I'm not going to, I'll be that dude sitting on the bench on the basketball team till you're a senior and you finally make the varsity just because you're too old to play any of the other deals. And but I was like, why not eighth grade? I mean, in eighth grade, we kind of play everything, and he said, no, I need to really concentrate on this. And so he obviously started a little bit different path, playing more state and national type tournaments and doing some other things where I was a kid just playing the local stuff like everybody else did. Right. We get to high school and now we're both, the only thing we do is play golf, for the school, and, that great relationship. And you know how that is. And golf in Texas is just like college golf. You play fall and spring. And so it's an all year deal. You're always going to practice together. He and I were always, together. I always remember fondly that we would go from school and we would drive through Sonic because it was the happy hour was starting at 2:00, and we would get the big Route 44 cherry limeade and we go out to the little place where we hit balls because they didn't have a driving range. And it was just it's what was called the polo fields back then. For those who've been to College Station, it's where they have the bonfire memorial. But they had a little tee out there that the college coach, Bob Ellis, had kind of built for the college team. And we could go out and hit a few balls or do whatever, we go play. Back then, the college course was, no one was ever playing it. And so it was kind of a goat ranch. And so we'd sometimes go and just drop our shag bag like in the 17th fairway and just hit 50 balls at the green and go up. And, there might be one ball mark, not because we didn't hit the green, but because it was so rock hard, and, fix your ball mark. And then you'd throw them all in the butt. We practiced like that and that kind of thing. And did life together throughout our high school careers. And Alan obviously not only was better skill wise, but seemed to have the wherewithal to dig in, because this is pre-internet and all this. You got to research this stuff and figure out and ask around. And so he was able to figure out, that you got to go play in the Houston Golf Association stuff. And then from there went into the, AJGA and all the things and got recruited and that kind of deal. And he when he lost in the semifinals of the U.S. Junior out in El Cajon, California, they took me with them and I caddied for them. Brian Gay and David Duval won that year, and Alan, and I'm blanking on who the fourth was, but the final four was pretty awesome. They all went to play college golf. They all went on to be like tour players and that kind of thing. And
that week, one of my players at Eben High School, Chris Edgman, was the medalist that week at El Cajon. So there you go.
There you go.
Full circle.
And so, yeah, so I went out, we did that. So I did a few things like that. My wife always picks on me. She was always like, you don't make good choices when it comes to your own health. And then she always uses this as an example. Alan was playing in, I'm going to say, I think we might have been in college. I don't think this was in we would have been in college. And he was back home from Oklahoma State, and he was playing in like the U.S. Open qualifier or probably U.S. Amateur qualifier, 36 holes at the Woodlands Country Club. It's 104. And I went and caddied for him, and I had my wisdom teeth taken out probably 3 days before. But felt like I was going to be able to just walk around and hand him golf clubs. And I ended up getting real dehydrated, getting dry sockets. I was like super sick the next day, had to go back to the dentist. And my wife was like, why in God's name would you do something like that? I was like, well, what do you mean? Why not? Like, my buddy needed a caddy for this deal. And like, that's what you do, And so whenever she sees me making a bad decision, like for my back or whatever like that, now she's like, hey, remember, you're not good at this. Maybe you need to think this through.
Well, you married up, that's for sure. She's I bet she's given you a lot of good advice through the years. Well, listen, your coaching experience has been sort of threefold. You started at Texas A&M as a volunteer assistant coach, and then an assistant men's and women's coach, and then the assistant men's coach for Bob Ellis. Then you went and spent 10 years with Rick LaRose at Arizona, and then you've come to UTSA. So you've had the gamut, you've run the gamut of the experiences. So I'm going to ask you a question about Bob Ellis and Rick LaRose. So Those two guys were legends in college golf, both of them Hall of Famers, and both of them were longtime coaches. What are the main things you picked from either one or both of those guys that helped you be a better coach?
Okay, so the first thing is kind of the same for both of them. And I think it's not only made me a better coach, but it's helped me coach others better. And that is the fact that they did not micromanage. And what I mean by that is, so I had grown up in College Station, knew Coach Ellis. And when I got into high school, I started working, picking up balls at his golf camps in the summer, and then became like a counselor, and then became, kind of really helping run that whole thing. And back in the day, golf camps are not like they are today, where they're like 3 or 4 days and it's a lot of fun. You play a lot of games and you do some stuff and you learn some stuff. They were like military grinds, 7 full days of hitting balls for 3 hours and then playing 18 holes, and then having sessions at night about regripping clubs and about, all these things. Like, we look back on it now, we were like, that was the worst thing ever. And those kids loved it because they didn't know any different. That's just the way life was. You try to run a camp like that now, people would like revolt, and their kids would have, nobody would make it. That parents would be picking their kids up halfway through the week. But anyway, when I got the job, you had to do an internship to finish your degree in kinesiology and sport management at A&M. And it was a semester-long degree or semester-long internship. And I was picking and choosing and didn't really know what I was going to do. And finally it dawned on me. I was like, man, I've basically been his assistant coach this whole time anyway. I do a lot of stuff, even not during the summer. I go in and I piddle around. It was almost like being the manager of the team without really, having that designated title or anything like that. But I was always around, and we were members at Pebble Creek where the team played. I played with those guys like all the time, and, kind of felt part of the group without truly being part of the group. And so I just went to his office one day. I said, hey, I got to do this internship. You think that, Oklahoma State has an assistant coach and Georgia Tech has an assistant coach? I mean, there weren't a lot of them out there, but there were a few. I said, you think they'd let me be the assistant coach for my internship? He goes, well, I don't know, I'll ask. And basically their response was, well, yeah, I mean, if it's free, of course, why not? And so that fall, I was the volunteer assistant for the men's team, and we did pretty well. And we, in the spring, Coach Ellis says, okay, now you graduated. He said, now, if you want to be in this coaching business and in the golf business itself, not necessarily a golf pro, he gave me that advice. He said, he was like, being a golf pro at a golf course is tough business. You're kind of a second-class citizen. You're just taking it all the time from the members. Whatever the deal is, there's always a problem. It's never like, quote, good. Even when it's good, there's always somebody griping and that kind of thing. He said, your personality, you're a real positive guy and you're real upbeat. You're not really, that's probably not your best deal. But he said all the other golf stuff, whether that's club manufacturing or that's being a club rep or that's being, golf ball guy or whatever the thing is, he said, that stuff's going to come across my desk right here. He said, you're not going to just read that in the wanted ads at home trying to find a job. He said, so if you're willing to do it and you're able to do it financially, continue being the volunteer assistant in the spring, and let's see where this goes. So I was like, okay. My wife was working full time so that I could kind of finish up in school, and, we're, eating beans and rice and doing our deal and barely making it by, but that's what I do. So volunteer that whole year, don't get paid, that kind of thing. We make it to the NCAA regional. Now, back then, A&M, Mike, you'll know, when was the first regional? Was it like 88?
89.
89. And they had always made it to the regional. That wasn't an issue at all. And we're always usually kind of that team that they thought might get that last spot out or whatever the kind of deal was, or should make it. And somehow, for just like 7 years in a row or whatever, they were snake bit. They'd miss by one shot or whatever the deal was, or their best player would just play awful that week. And, had he just even halfway shown up, they would have got out, et cetera, et cetera. And well, this time we go to Michigan, and Oklahoma State was actually there, and SMU was there with Hank Haney, and they were ranked high, and some other teams. And we went and we played great and we won. And so we make it to the nationals at in '96 at Chattanooga.
Yep.
Where Tiger won. And this is the first time they've made it. So anyway, long story short, basically they say, hey, this worked out great, and y'all made it to the national, that kind of thing. So they were going to hire me as assistant coach. So they hired me as the men and women's coach, assistant. And you're making no money. That was the last year of the restricted earnings thing. So I made $16,000. Now,
I remember making that.
I wasn't in the pool long enough to where I could get into the class action suit and make any money back out of that deal, like some of those basketball coaches did. But still, I was the last guy in there. And Jeannie Sutherland was the women's coach, and we just split time. And if the girls were going, I traveled with the girls to a couple of tournaments, and the girls hosted a tournament. And with the men, I traveled to all those tournaments and that kind of thing, kind of back and forth a little bit. And, we practiced at the same place. So I was kind of being able to kind of do, it was easy to kind of split time. And both those coaches did a great job of just kind of letting me do my thing. And so anyway, backing up after the first year and I'm hired, I look at Coach Ellison. I said, you've been sitting here and you're basically recruiting off the computer all the time. And you're not going out and laying eyes on a lot of these kids, or you've done a lot of homework on the computer. This guy shoots a lot of good scores, and then you only go see him once. And you just kind of go, oh, yeah, that looks good, that kind of thing. But you didn't really get to know him. You didn't get to know his family. You didn't get to know his background. I said, so I'm not doing these golf camps anymore. I'm going to recruit. And he said, man, that's great. And so he just basically gave me carte blanche and said, go. And so, I mean, I was at the US Junior, and I was at the, all the things we go to, right? The Rolex and the polo and then all of the summer tournaments and all the AJGA events. And it was out there week after week after week. And, kind of, he just sort of would give me the reins of kind of how is this going to play out? And I'd say, well, these are the guys I've identified. We're bringing these guys in on a visit. And then he would kind of, put his stamp of approval on that, or, kind of meet them there. Or if he did go out to a tournament, if we had a free week or something, I directed them and said, this is who you go watch, and that kind of thing. And because he gave me that freedom and he didn't micromanage me, he wasn't calling me every other day saying, hey, what's going on out there? How you doing in this? Or did you remember to do that? It was just like, these are your things to do. I know you'll do them. See you at the end. And I always thought that was pretty good. Well, it helped me get that Arizona job, because when Coach LaRose was the director of golf, he then split and went back just with the men, and he gave his assistant, Todd McCorkle, the women's coaching job. And now he needed an assistant. And so he asked around, and people like Bill Monagill at TCU and some of the other coaches, while he was out, they said, hey, this Knauer guy is killing it. Like, we don't show up at a tournament, kind of like what we always say about you. Like, we show up and there you are on the range already, beat us there. And I was kind of, doing that kind of stuff. And so he goes, okay. So then he interviews me and brings me in and basically tells me that I kind of hear the same words, right? Like, you're going to get to kind of run the team. You're going to get to kind of, do all the stuff at practice, and you're going to get to do all the recruiting, do all these things. He was like, he ran this massive fundraiser that took up a lot of his time. And he was like, I need a co-head coach is what I need, not an assistant paper pusher. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. So I get to Arizona, August 30th of 1998. And I stay at Coach LaRose's house that night. And the next day is the first day of school. And I said, all right, what are we going to do? Like, how's this going to work? And he goes, okay. He goes, I'm going to Las Vegas tomorrow to the PGA show, and I'm going to be there for a week. And we're leaving the next Saturday to the Topi Cup. And because of the Japan deal and all the travel things like that stuff had to be submitted months and months ago. So like, as an assistant, I'm not going on that trip because I've just gotten there and that kind of thing. He said, so here's what I need you to do. Here's the directions to the office. Now, I'd been there on the visit or whatever, but he was like, here's the directions. He goes, go in and talk to our secretary, Pat. She'll help you figure out like who to go talk to, get your keys and that kind of stuff. He said, here's Andy Barnes, Ricky Barnes' older brother, who was a senior on our team. He said, he'll be the team captain. He said, here's his phone number. Call him, talk to him a little bit about, practice this week. He said, then host qualifying this week, pick the team, and then call me and let me know who I'm meeting at the airport, because he was flying in on Saturday. The team was going to meet him there, and they were flying out to Japan. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, I don't even know where I'm going. I don't know the names of the streets. You want me to pick? I've never met any of these players. You just want me to have qualifying and pick the team myself and just, that kind of deal. And he's like, yeah, you got it. And so that was my introduction to Arizona. And that's the way it was for 10 straight years. Everyone always teased Coach LaRose, like, oh, you're just retired. Knauer runs the whole thing, blah, blah, blah. He's doing the whole job. And we all laughed about that. Now we know that's not true. He was doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and he had his things that only head coaches can do and things like that. But he gave me carte blanche on everything. I had the whole budget to order all the stuff and dealt with Nike and doing all that kind of thing. He had no clue what we were ordering. It would just show up and I'd be like, here's your shirts and your shoes and your whatever and that kind of thing. And he never, ever once came in my office and said, hey, did you get this done? Have you done this? And it was actually the opposite. He would walk in my office as he's walking out the door and go, hey, is there anything you need me to do for you? And I always kind of laughed at him and was like, that's not how it works. It's me doing stuff for you, coach. And he was like, no, you got a lot going on your plate here. And do you need me to call somebody, or you need me to do something? Whatever you need me to do, let me know. And, because obviously the recruiting, I'd say, hey, I need you to call this kid tomorrow. He's going to be expecting you or something like that. But so I've always taken that, whether it was with my players, but especially with the assistants that I had under me, of find out what they're good at, hire them for that, and then go let them do that. Don't put your thumb on them all the time and try to manage them all the time. That's the whole reason you got them. And to me, that was the absolute number one thing that I look back for 27 years. It was the greatest gift ever given to me, because in 13 years as an assistant coach of some capacity, that was probably at least worth 3 times. That was almost 40 years worth of coaching. When I became a head coach, and we all know you become a head coach and you find out, oh, geez, I didn't even know that we had to do these things, because that's meetings only the head coaches went to, or, those were only problems that the head coaches had to make decisions. So there's always a learning curve, but I felt like I was way ahead of that learning curve. Had I not had that, and I alluded to earlier, when I started this program, it might've been better if I'd have started it, from scratch. There was a lot of issues going on. Without the experience I had, I would have probably screwed that up royally, because I did screw some things up. We all do. And then you figure that out and you make, you move that. But my learning curve was so much better from what those guys gave to me. And, when you're in the moment, you don't always know it, how much people are helping you. I think that it's a deal that when you're 20 years old, you just want to get out there and win that title, and you want to show everybody up, and you want to be big man, and you want the spotlight on you and all this stuff. Hey, look what bet on your chest. Hey, look what I did. And then you kind of get 30 and 40 and you're kind of like, okay, great. I still want to win all those championships, but maybe muted a little bit, and maybe you're not so brash and you're not so whatever. And as a person in life, maybe your goals change. Now you have children. You may need to be worried about making more money or whatever you're doing, right? Well, now I'm 50, and I know, we tease all the time. I tell you how old you are, Mike, but when you hit 50, you kind of get this epiphany of, man, you really are on the back side of it. And you start to reflect on all the people that helped you get where you were. And you've said that in speeches before, back when you were 30 and 40, thanks to so-and-so for this award. And I thank all the people that helped me get here, but I don't know if you really understand what you're thanking them for. And now that you're older, you really understand all those things that all those people did for you. And it's why that I'm moving home to take care of my parents, because those 2 people did more for me It's my turn to go do something for them. And without them, I'm nowhere. I'm not going to be able to make it to where I was today, that kind of thing. And so I just really, am grateful for what those two coaches really, really did for me.
Well, when I look back on it, that's one of the things I'm grateful to Mike Holder for, is he didn't always micromanage or tell me this is how you do this. Most of it was his example. And he said, you got to figure some of these things out on your own. I did. I figured I figured them out the hard way, a lot of them, because I made mistakes. But that's interesting that two very successful coaches in Bob Ellis and Rick LaRose were basically teaching you the same thing that Mike Holder was trying to teach me, is you're going to have to figure some of this out on your own. So go get it. Really, really well said there, John. Thanks. So you become the coach at UTSA in 2008. It's a very different experience than what you just described at A&M and or Arizona. Those were big time programs, Power 5 conferences, big time stuff. Now you become a mid-major head coach. You're still a head coach, but it's a different look. Something's different. So I'm going to ask you very quickly, if you can, hit on a couple of major differences. Like, these are definitely different, and maybe biggest challenges for a mid-major coach versus a Power 5.
So the first difference is perspective. So when I was at A&M, we were always kind of a top 25 team, but usually more down 25, 30. That year, the last year that we were there, we finished we were 11th. Ryan Palmer was on the team, that kind of thing. Great players. And we had, so I get this chance to go to Arizona, and you think, well, they're always a top 3 team. I mean, they're talking about national titles and stuff like that. And at that time, unlike now, where maybe the Big 12 this year was so incredibly strong, the SEC has just been a juggernaut lately. Back then, the Pac-10 was it. And Arizona and Arizona State and UCLA and USC and all these teams were just, that was where it was. Like, you'd have all 10 teams make it to the regionals, and 9 of them would get out to the nationals. Like, this was the place to go. They had their little slogan of Conference of Champions, and it was really true back then. And so when I was at Arizona, I remember making the statement to people when I was looking at other jobs, and coaches would say, hey, would you be interested in this job or whatever? And I would say, I can't imagine, because remember, we went to 25 NCAA tournaments in a row. Now I realize, compared to Oklahoma State, 65 or whatever y'all did that time, it kind of maybe pales, but we were kind of like second behind that. I mean, that was sort of a unicorn there, but 25 in a row. And most of that is during the regionals, and not just when you could just show up. And that kind of thing. That was quite an accomplishment, and it brought in a lot of stress. You look at a Nick Saban and the Alabamas and stuff like that, and you think, this guy's got to have some stress every year, knowing, like, if you're not in the college football playoff, like, it is a terrible year. And if you don't go to the nationals, like, that's it, it's over. Like, life just doesn't exist, right? And so I always said, I can't imagine these coaches that are coaching at these schools where, and back then too, you didn't advance just by winning your conference. And so that happened kind of like after I started coaching here the next year. And so I just didn't really have that perspective, right? So when I actually took this job, I thought, okay, there's going to be a few years where we're not going to be going to the national championship. Heck, we're not even going to be going to the regionals. But I also knew, with the new rule, you could win the conference, and maybe there was a little bit more of a path. 500 rule came into effect my last year at Arizona. So again, I thought maybe we could do some changes and I'd be there. But boy, your perspective changes. After a few years of not going, you start to understand that this isn't just about recruiting kids that hit the ball straight and make putts. This is about recruiting players that have the ability to do that, but they need some coaching and to truly coach them up. At Arizona, I'm not so sure how much coaching up we did. I feel like we were a lot more of a just manager, and it was like a professional basketball team. How much are you really teaching those guys on dribbling or, a certain move? You may teach them a little bit, but it may be more kind of like what we do now a lot, course management, like decade and stuff like that. That may be the little icing on the cake that puts you over the top. And so the perspective was I had to really, really change that this is not just getting a bunch of mercenaries to come in here and play golf and play their best golf and give me their all. This was about coming alongside people and making them better people, and in turn will make you a better golfer. And so I totally, when I figured that out and totally changed my thinking to, I need to get people in here that I know more about. I started only recruiting Texas kids because they were readily available. It's a lot easier to go recruit them. You can see them more often than you can a foreign kid or someone across the country or wherever. You can spend more quality time with them and their family and find out how they're raised and all that kind of stuff. That's when my teams got really good. And we started knocking on the door, and we made it to the NCAA regionals on our own number, and not just winning a conference championship to get out. We started making it to the finals of, and we've lost 2 of the last 3 Conference USA championships. We've unfortunately finished second, but they were by, the last hole, last stroke in match play. One went 6 extra holes. Like, we were right there. Whereas not 4 or 5 years prior to that, we couldn't have sniffed any of that stuff. But it's because we didn't have the good enough players. I just wasn't coaching them right. And so that's a big difference. The other thing I used to say, and Mike, you probably remember this, we used to call it the herd. So the herd would walk around at an AJGA Rolex, All America event or whatever, and there'd be 20 of us coaches walking around watching Hunter Mahan or watching, whoever, all these big time names at the time. And we're all kind of watching them. Well, of course, we all know he's good. There was zero evaluation going on. We all knew the guy was good. Same thing. All we were doing is just being there to show our hat. So most of the time we weren't even paying attention to the golf. We're all talking. And we were like, it was kind of like a little networking event. We were, hey, why don't you come play in our tournament? We'll come play in your tournament. Or what would you do here? Blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, I got a problem with this kid. We were all kind of just doing that stuff. And I also remember making a statement of, why doesn't the quote UTSA coach just show up at this event and just walk around? Don't even watch anybody, just walk around. Make sure that your hat is seen, and then just pick the last player in the field that is not getting recruited by any of us. It's got to be better than the player they're getting now, right? And I realized when I got here, after going to a couple of U.S. amateur, U.S. juniors and stuff like that as this coach at UTSA, what a waste of time and money I was doing, because the last player in the field really wasn't better than the player I could have gotten. And again, what if the last player in the field's a turd? You don't even want that guy just because he was, good enough or better than the players on your team, right? And so that was just going to wreck your locker room, if you will. So I really started to understand why those coaches, weren't at the Rolex Tournament of Champions. They were at the local city, whatever tournament, and they were really pouring into someone's life. And that in turn made that player a lot better. And those were the 2 big things that I think I took away when I got here from a Power 5 national championship type programs, living in that world, to a non-Power 5 person. Doesn't mean you can't call up the Mike McGraw of the world and talk to him. Doesn't mean if you are at a tournament together, you can't hang out and eat lunch. You didn't get kicked out of the group, out of the herd, because you weren't at every tournament, but you were not going to do what was best for your school, what was best for your team, and what was just kind of best for everyone involved by just trying to do it the same way that you did it before. You had to evolve. And here in San Antonio is a big city. And so you can start by recruiting who's good in the city. In Tucson, Arizona, we didn't recruit the city. We didn't even recruit the state. We just recruited all over the country. I got on an airplane almost every time I went to a recruiting event. Now I don't ever go on an airplane. I get in my team van that's like a billboard, and I go drive up the road to Austin or to Houston or College Station, and I get to do those kind of things. So it was a way different kind of eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah, and even a Power Five school like I am at Baylor right now, I basically started doing what you just described. I started recruiting Texas kids. In the last 5 years, we've pretty much had all Texas kids, or 6 years on the team. And I like getting in a van and driving up to Dallas, or getting in a van and going over to San Antonio to try to find a player. And Texas has a lot of really good players, so that can be done. But I definitely see where a mid-major is using his resources better if he's recruiting guys he could actually get and develop relationships with, he and his family. That's really, really good advice. I think a lot of coaches do what you just said, or make the mistake of doing what you talked about, which is, I've got to go to the Rolex Tournament Champions, I've got to go to the U.S. Junior, and then they end up not getting players, or not getting the players they want. So that's good advice. I have another question for you. What's the biggest change you've seen in 25 or so years of coaching that you like, and a change that you don't really like? Because you're exiting the stage right now, and so you've seen a lot of these things for 25 years. Best change, and probably to you the change you like the least.
So to me, the best change has been, and it probably comes from multiple areas to get to this one place, but the parity in men's college golf right now is enormous. And there are so many good programs out there with so many good coaches. So when I first started in 1996, there was a handful of teams that really tried hard. When I told Coach Ellis, I'm going out there to go recruit and I'm going to go every week, I instantly became one of the 25 teams that was there every week at all the events. So when you think that right now, the haves and the have-nots, the Power Five versus the next group of five, and we all know in golf, just Power Five doesn't mean always everything. I mean, a school like Pepperdine's not in the Power Five, but they're awesome at golf, right? So sometimes it's weather, but if you just look at that, if there was only 25 really doing that. So back in the day, I know you'll remember, Golf Week was really the only poll that was out there, and it was done kind of on a point system. And so when you played in a tournament that had X number of ranked teams in it, that was going to help your strength of schedule and all that. And basically 20 teams from around the country, so, and it was from the whole country. So it'd be UCLA and USC and UNLV and Texas and A&M and Oklahoma State, blah, 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 Florida State, that kind of thing. We all just played in the same tournaments 10 weeks out of the deal. We just traveled around and played each other. And so you were automatically always ranked really high. You shut out all these other teams from being ranked high. And so the committee was different back then on how you chose teams to go to regionals. It was a district allocation thing and all this other stuff. So now it is opened up, and it is basically the most fair because of the 500 rule. It has forced those great teams to play a better, wider schedule, which gives you a better true ranking, right? People ask me about the 500 rule all the time, and I always say the thing I remember the most was I was at the regional at Arizona State, and while I was at Arizona, and South Carolina was at the regional, and South Carolina was ranked 35th in the country, and they, no kidding, were something like 30-100 for the year as their head-to-head record. But they had like the number one schedule in the country. Every week there was 15 teams in the tournament. Every week they finished like 12th or 13th. And the worst team in the field is, ranked 28th, and so by the numbers in the matrix, they were ranked. Well, guess what? They come to the tournament, they win the regional, they advance, and they finish like, I don't remember, 11th or something at the national championship. They a really good finish, that kind of thing. They obviously were a great team, but everybody kind of cried foul that, they just, quote, bought their way in. Now there's other teams on this, they deserved it, right? They were good, but there were other teams that weren't as good as that kind of did the same thing. They could sort of just buy their way in by just scheduling good. They knew all the right people. They got into all the right tournaments, that kind of stuff. And to be honest, I see some of that in women's golf still with no 500 rule. I see some schools that basically can schedule their way in. And I think that's been a big bonus for the overall sport of golf. TV is obviously part of that. The match play is part of that. Everybody that gripes about match play and says 72 holes of stroke play is going to give you a better, they were vindicated this year because the top 8 teams in the country were the top 8 to the match play. Mathematically impossible that can even happen. And the bottom 8 teams in that field finished in the bottom 8. Again, it was the strangest thing. I don't know if that was Greyhawk that did that, just the way the course was set up, those teams, if that is just the lining up of the stars, but still in the end, the 4th team that week and the 7th team that week, and I don't know what Texas and Arizona, I think Arizona State might have been 3rd or 4th in the national rankings or whatever. So obviously good enough to be where they were, both those teams. But when it comes down to it, I think a lot of those things have made our sport so good and so competitive, but it's hard to tell the story. My team this year had a few bad events. And so we did not make the regional on our own number. And like I said, we lost on the last hole of the last match of the whatever and stroke to get out. We were this close, right on the edge. But we finished like 84th or something like that in the country. My team's really good. And we're 84 in the country.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you right now, I'm not trying to say that, well, I think the polls are wrong, that my team is good enough. We're really 50. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying there's 84 great teams. If you're ranked in the top 100 in men's golf, you got some players. And you're probably one player away from jumping an enormous amount of spots, going from 80 to 40. Or to 30. The year before, we hung out in the top 30 for 5 straight weeks. We made it to 26. And, I'm not so sure if that team was really any better than the team I had this year. It was just sometimes 1 or 2 tournaments we didn't play good, or maybe we had a guy hurt, whatever the deal was. It just didn't play out in our favor, right? And it's that tight of a margin. So to me, that's a positive, right? Because the more you can have where it's good like that, then you're going to have more junior golfers want to play. When I went to college, I was recruited by Methodist Division III. They were national champions back then, just like they are all the time now, right? I was recruited by a couple other small colleges, Austin College up in Lake Denton, which I'm not even sure what they were, NAIA or something. I don't even know what they were. But some small schools. And I said, no. And here I thought I was being really smart, and it worked out for me. But I was like, no, I'm going to go to A&M, get a degree, get a real job. I'm not going to play the tour, that kind of thing. So why would I go play college golf? Now it's a completely opposite deal. There's so many schools that are so good and offer such a great thing. There's so many schools that are even Division II schools that have sprinter vans like we do, and they have indoor hitting facilities, and they have all this stuff. It's not just Oklahoma and Oklahoma State and Texas and whatever anymore like it was, that had all these great things. And you can have a phenomenal career. And then you can honestly, if you put in, like Coach Field said last night on the thing, if you are willing to put in the reps and do the work, then it's possible. It's possible because they've given them the facilities or the chance to do that. Well, it's possible at a lot of other places now, right? And so I think, to me, that's just the overall grand scheme of things. Now, it can also be athletic departments have realized golf is a great fundraiser. It's a great, something that the people who are your donors, they play golf. Your donors don't run track. Your donors don't throw the discus. They don't, even if they played basketball, they don't play basketball anymore. They don't play pickup games, but they all go play golf. And so they can kind of understand that a little bit. It's good to have that and, up those things, whether it's facilities or, just money in general. Right. And so whatever the avenue that did it, I just think that's one of the great things. On the flip side, I am an old person, not as old as you, obviously, but I'm an old person and I'm a traditionalist. I grew up in College Station, Texas, where Texas A&M is everything. College sports is everything. You're not necessarily a Astros fan or a Dallas Cowboys fan or whatever, because those cities back in the day were a long way away. They're right down the road for you now. But they're a long back then. It was college sports or nothing. You just really didn't mess with. There are no pro teams there, etc. And so I am biased for sure in the fact that, and also A&M is a very special place. I think everybody knows they have a lot of traditions and they have a lot of stuff that really, sucks you in. We always tease it's the cult and all these kind of things. And so you're there and you're part of it as a fan. You're not just a fan that hopes they win, and if they lose, so what? Like when they lose, it's gut-wrenching and that kind of deal. So the thing that I don't like is all this transfer portal stuff and all this other things to where it's become kind of free agency. Now, I am for, if you can go out and Johnny Kiefer on your team is a special kid and somebody in Waco wants to give him $10,000 to tweet that his French fries are the best and whatever, and he thinks that will help him, that's great. I'm all for that. I hope these kids make millions and millions of dollars. What I don't really like to see is there's no guardrails. And, A&M's been in the football has been in the news a lot with, all this kind of stuff, NIL money and things like that. Well, it's legal. They're not doing anything illegal. And there's a lot of schools that are having these collectives and whatever, and these donors are pouring money into this collective and that kind of thing. But and that's all fine. But if they can get some rules on it to where it's not kind of almost in a sense you're buying players, it's saying, if I'm recruiting a golfer and the golfer says, well, Coach McGraw said that, okay, he's going to give me a full scholarship and you're going to give me a full scholarship. Well, that's an equal deal. And, this and this, these were all equal. But you know what? They have this awesome practice facility at the Billy, and y'all's practice facility is great at the TPC, but theirs is just a little bit better. I'm going to make the decision to go there. Hey, great. Mm-hmm. Man, that's awesome. I think that's a great, well thought out choice. Or they have a degree that you don't have. Great. That kind of thing. But when it comes down to your collective, I can get in it, but there's no guarantee of getting whatever. But Coach McGraw said in his collective, all his golfers have something and I can get another 15 grand. You know what I'm saying? I'm not necessarily saying I'm against that. I'm just saying that right now, until they have some rules, can you imagine? I'm going to use Xander Lozano as a example here. When I recruited him, I mean, this guy is a full scholarship kind of guy for me. He's a game changer for me. Well, he's a 20% guy at an A&M or a Baylor or TCU or whatever. He's just another one of their players. And had he gone to one of those places, he would have probably played great and made him good, and that's all fine. And but for me, the one thing I sold him on was, I mean, you're going to get to play right away and you're going to be a game changer here. Now, can you imagine if now that same person comes up, Texas A&M's got billions of dollars in this collective, and they say all our golfers always get, we can't guarantee you, right? Because that's not the way the rules work, but they all have $15,000-$20,000 deal or something. Well, they're going to offer him books, and he's going to get 20 grand, which is a little over a full scholarship. Matter of fact, it's more like 60% scholarship. Well, that's way better. Had they just offered him 60%, that beat my full. You know what I'm saying? Because they have better facilities. They have a chance to win national championship, all the things, right? So that the only advantage that I had over a Power 5 school is I could outspend them if I wanted to. If that person, that's going to be gone right now. And I don't know. I don't like that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I am saying that I'm biased, and that's coming from me, the UTSA golf coach, me, the person that you go to school and you play for your team and you're come back to your alma mater and all this tradition and pageantry and all that kind of stuff. I just don't like to see well, I came here. Yeah, I'm not really playing good, so I'm gonna transfer over there. I'm gonna, that kind of thing. I just, it's one thing if you feel like you don't like the coach, or your coach changes, or whatever the reason is, you can't get better there. There's a better opportunity somewhere else. I mean, I get that. People transferred before, right? But now it's like everybody's in the transfer portal every year. And it's like you're just a reshuffling the deck.
Yeah, if I could change one thing about the transfer portal, it would be, yes, anybody can transfer if they want. They can put their name in the portal, but I would say there needs to be a meeting between an administrator, the coach, the player, and his parents, all in one room. Let's talk about it. If nothing can be worked out, then let him go. But right now, a kid truly doesn't have to go to his coach to even in person to even say, I want to leave. He just gets his name in the transfer portal, and the coach finds out from the compliance office. So I would make that change if I was going to. At least there has to be I'm growing up and I want to be a man and I don't like this situation. So coach, I'm ready to go. And instead of just gone. So I would change that in the transfer portal.
Yeah, I think that's kind of big. Now golf maybe, and in different programs, obviously it's different, but so if a kid at Georgia just says, yeah, and gets in the portal, well, Coach Hack can just say, well, that's fine. See ya. You're not playing for us anymore. You quit on us.
Yep.
Right. But because he's got another guy that's just as good on the bench. Now at a sport like at a place like mine, if my best player said, you know what, I'm going to get in the portal, I'm going to try to do whatever and stuff, and I know he's gone, I don't even want him back because he quit. But dang, if that guy is my only guy that can shoot 68 for this year alone, I may still need to want to play him. And so that puts the coach in kind of a bad position because you're kind of like telling the rest of your kids, man, I'm playing this dude that's quitting on us, right? Or you let him, you say you don't play, but now you don't make it to the regional because, you didn't have your best player. Right. And now I think other sports are able to do that a little differently because they play their other guy, basketball, football, whatever. They have the second string guy that comes in and he's just, pretty much the same or whatever that thing is. But in golf, your number one player, your number 6 player at any school is not as good as your number 1 player. And that's a big jump. And so I think it for golf, I'm not liking that as much. So I would say that's kind of been my one real big negative change that I've seen.
I totally understand. And I think both NIL and transfer portal are both so young right now that we're not sure what the fallout is going to be. So probably a few more years down the line and you'll be out in the business world making hundreds of millions of dollars. So it won't matter. Maybe you could do an NIL deal for me as a coach.
There we go.
Okay. Well, listen, John, I really appreciate you coming in. I was blown away by your ability. Well, no, I wasn't. I knew this was going to be the way it was, that you would be able to talk on several subjects. You did a fantastic job. I really, really enjoyed the insight. And I hope you'll stay in touch. I hope when we come and play in the Aggie Invitational that you and I grab a cup of coffee together. How about that?
I'll be out there for sure. That will not be a problem. And when you coach for 27 years and you make the friends that you make in this business, that just doesn't go away. And I don't know about the other sports, how close they get to their coaches and what they do, but our sport is very unique in the fact that we talk to each other all the time. We ask each other's opinions. We do things like that. Most of us are not very secretive about things. I mean, occasionally if you're recruiting, you may not say you're recruiting a kid or something like that. But for the most part, you really do. You just let people make the decisions on what they need, what's best for them. But I've got a phone book list in my phone of all the top coaches across the entire country. And I can pick it up at any time and just call them. I don't know if our football coach can just call Nick Saban and say, hey, whatever the deal is, or our basketball coach can just call the Duke coach and say, hey, Coach K, you're retiring, but maybe they can. But I mean, I think our sport has really led to the sharing of ideas. And to me, as what I consider a lifelong learner, I'm always trying to learn from other people. And it's why I said I wanted to be on this podcast. I've listened to all these podcasts that you've done, and I think it's really helped me be a better person, a better coach. and that kind of thing. And so just because I'm going into the business side, the job I'm going to be doing is coaching. I'm just going to be coaching adults instead of kids. And those adults don't have to go to class either. And so, take up half their day. So it's going to be kind of a nice thing. But I still think I'll be reaching out to my fellow coaches and friends and say, hey, what was you doing this type of thing? And I'll be rooting from behind the scenes. And I think the one thing that is going to be nice is going home, just because I'm a road runner right now, or I was an Arizona Wildcat or whatever, you're still an Aggie. That's your alma mater. You still rooted for them. You still watched them on TV or whatever. But now I get to just wear my Aggie shirts and do whatever, you know what I'm saying? Whereas around town, I don't wear that stuff here. I wear my UTSA shirt.
Well, and John, now you get to proudly display your Gig'em tattoo down to your ankle. I mean, people are going to see that in College Station. So yeah, right. I'll let you say it one time on the podcast. Go ahead and say it. Gig'em. Gig'em. All right. Well, John, thanks again. Best of luck with everything you got going forward. And as I said, you owe me a cup of coffee in early April when I'm there for the Aggie Invitational. So I'll see you then.
We'll do it. Thank you, Mike.